A&B Properties is Quincy's largest apartment rental company with hundreds of units available. They offer short-term and long-term rentals with 1 up to 4 bedroom apartments. A&B Properties meets the needs of its tenants with care, compassion, and a quality of service that exceeds expectations. A&B Properties also has a convenient tenant app for you to do your payments or make repair requests. Give them a call today. A&B Properties, 217-919-8080, Quincy.
General Mills.
Yeah. You know what they do over there?
Yeah, I sure do. I sure do. And I've had a lot of friends. So a lot of people have come to the Quincy area for General Mills. David Samuel, everybody, for the new Frankie Say edition of, or podcast edition of Frankie Say. David Samuel, you are starting at General Mills on Monday?
Yeah, very excited.
So are you aware of General Mills? They're super good at bringing in people from out of town with like engineering degrees. They'll give them like sometimes 2-year contracts, and sometimes they will move downtown Quincy, on the promenade, and hang out and like be like amazing people, and then they leave.
That's frustrating.
Do you know any of those people?
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think it's a great thing that corporations are able to do, is bring in folks to an area. And then I think it's the challenge for the area to keep them around, and how they do that as a community, as a group of individuals, whatever that means. I think that's the biggest challenge that a lot of communities have, is retaining those folks, and how do you get people to stick around?
So you think the 2020 election was the cleanest election ever in American history? Do you like that?
Yeah.
You like that? You wrote that to me.
Yeah.
You said, I think, by the way, I don't even have time to disagree with you.
Yeah.
Because it's still fresh in my head. You think the 2020 election was the cleanest election ever? Or are you just saying like it was clean?
Well, let's pick a time in U.S. history and let's compare it.
How about the massive election interference in the year 2000 with Bush Gore, when Bush won Florida, and if you're a Dem, then you would say, well, that wasn't fair that Jeb Bush, George Bush's brother, was the governor of Florida. And obviously, since George Bush's brother was the governor of Florida, obviously Jeb stepped in and kind of did the, and then just made Bush win Florida. And so now he's the president. So do you think there was any election interference in the 2000 election?
No, I think Al Gore conceded in Florida. Therefore, Florida went to George Bush, and George W. Bush. And I think at that time, because right now we're rewinding 24 years ago, I think that the same as today, we're still the United States. And according to the United States, every state gets to kind of determine what the rules of voting are inside of that state. So yeah, is Jeb Bush able to, you could say push his thumb down on whatever, but I would say no. He still has to follow the rules of the state, and even though he's the governor, he doesn't get to just arbitrarily dictate what those rules look like. And I would add that like Al Gore indicated it was a clean election. So if the person that conceded to it believes that it was a free and fair election, then why should I disagree with that?
Okay, that's fair. So in the last election, let's say that there was election interference, but Trump conceded.
But he didn't.
And nobody has come forward with any kind of true evidence that the election was quote unquote stolen. I don't know if it was stolen. I tend to not. I don't see any evidence that it was quote unquote stolen, but I think it was tampered with. And if it was tampered with, then maybe there was some interference. You know how like some political parties will talk about Russia getting involved and saying things like, "Oh, so-and-so is involved with Russia. Russia is doing interference for this person." Like, like people were saying that about Trump, that like the Russians were running interference for him. The Russians were doing this. The Russians were coming in. Maybe they were buying Facebook ads or whatever, creating some type of election interference. But I'm just saying, based on this idea, if we knew for a fact that there was election interference in the last election, in the 2020 election, if we knew that, but Trump conceded and said, "No, you know what? For the good of the country, I want a smooth transfer of power. Don't worry about it. It's fine." My question to you is, given that he conceded and given that it was kind of proven, we are of the opinion that there was election interference. My question to you is, was there election interference?
No, and I would add that
No.
Donald Trump is also
Interesting.
Because all right, so I think fundamentally, if you have to understand who I am and what I believe, I love America.
Okay.
Hardcore.
Yeah. Give me this preface.
Hardcore American, and I believe in the Constitution of the United States. And in the event that, let's say, now, am I going to come out here and say, hey, every single vote was proper? I'd say probably not. There's never been an election at any scale that's always been 100% clean across the board and whatnot, right? But we have a system in place as the United States that the states get to determine who wins the electors in each state and how those electors get divided. And the states have determined independently who to assign their electors to. And those states, unless there's some like cabal between like California and I guess the contested states that you'd say is Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, and Arizona. Unless first of all, even if one of those states got flipped, President Biden would still be the president in 2020, right? I mean, like, because we have to agree that like the math, because like I talk to a lot of my Democrat friends, and they think that the Electoral College is rigged because Democrats frequently win the popular election, but then lose the Electoral College. And I think that it kind of ended up helping them in 2020 because anytime I'm able to say, hey, there was election interference that happened in let's say, Illinois, for example, right? It gets isolated to just Illinois. But if we were to have 100% popular vote, then all of a sudden there's kind of weakness in the process that I think it should be considered. So I think to myself, like, did multiple states have enough interference that would have changed the results? And I say no. And I guess my challenge to you would be, what do you believe? Because, like, there was a candidate that asked a elected official, like, hey, I need to find 16,000 votes in Georgia, and you need to find that, even though they don't exist. If like, I would say if you look at the long scope of history, there's absolutely election interference, but where that election interference comes is not some it's usually bureaucrats or elected officials that are throwing away votes or casting votes aside or saying these votes don't count yet, right? Because like we know that like I'm getting a lot of letters or whatever, and generally it takes about 5 days to reach me in Quincy. And the reason is because of the logistics in the United States Postal Service or whatever, right? But we have an election day that says it's supposed to be on this Tuesday, the second Tuesday after or the first Tuesday after the second Monday of November. And I stop and I think to myself, like, okay, so if you're just going to say, hey, any like mailed in ballot that occurs after that date is no longer going to be valid, I would say if you indicated that that's not a fair vote, then I'd say, well, you would be then, participating in election interference because that's a legal vote according to the state laws. And you trying to deny that would be election interference. Would you agree to that?
So I think so. You're saying that if here's the cutoff date for mail-in voting, and let's say it's 5 days before the election.
It's not, but
it's not.
Okay, but let's say it is.
But you can postmark it when? How many days before the election can you postmark a mail-in ballot?
It's going to vary by state.
It's going to vary by state, okay.
Right, but like in Illinois, I believe it's that election day. Is that as long as you get it in that election day, then and I stop and I think, well, shouldn't that still count? If the rules of Illinois have determined that that's legal, then someone in Arizona shouldn't be able to say, well, that shouldn't count in Illinois, right? Because Illinois gets to determine what the rules, as long as it works within the structure of the federal election system.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in states' rights, as are you. I feel like you are. Or maybe I'm
for the
not.
most part. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you like the division? But you don't like the 10th Amendment talking about states' rights, and there's a lot in the 10th Amendment, but
Well, I would
division,
say 10th Amendment isn't about states' rights. It's about enumerated powers, right? It's the powers that are not listed are going to be offered to the states to execute.
Right. And when the founders wrote that, here are the number of powers that are enumerated to the feds, and then you've got this huge other area that is not. Mm-hmm. So that goes to the states.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the 2020 election, I heard Trump say stuff like, the mail-in ballot stuff is kind of a ruse. They're taking advantage of COVID, and we need to do our part to kind of ballot harvest. The Dems were hardcore, I guess, really pushing the mail-in ballots.
Yeah.
I think they were.
And they were legal at that time.
Yeah. And Trump said things like, to his own people, he said, don't send in mail-in ballots. Mm-hmm. He said that.
That was a strategy or a tactic that he chose to execute. And, and I think a lot of folks were like, okay, if you actually believe in the USPS, mail $100 to yourself. And I keep on thinking to myself, yeah, I would absolutely do that. The United States Postal Service is extremely reliable for most accounts. Obviously, it's not necessarily perfectly timely because it takes 5 days to send something even within the state, right? But I would say that in terms of reliability, like if you met your mailman or mailwoman, or
sure,
right, most consistent person I usually come across, and I've had 2 or 3 at my current house, 1 or 2 at the current house, 2 or 3 at the previous house. I appreciate their efforts, and I know that that's a challenging job because cold weather or whatnot. I still got my mail.
Unbelievable. Yeah, the men and women doing that job.
So in my mind, like I do trust that as a voting system, and yeah, I mailed in my ballot. I didn't mail it in, like I mailed it long before the.
Let me ask you this:
days.
Do you think Illinois has the right as a state to pull Joe Biden off the ticket because of his treasonous ways of not being able to secure the border? So hold on. Well, no, hold on a second.
Because that's being done in other states right now. Yeah.
Well, not exactly that, but I'm asking you this. Mm-hmm. We like the idea that the states have their own way of doing things. Mm-hmm. I'm asking you. I know what my answer is on this. I know what my partisan answer is, and my nonpartisan answer, and then my alien from 36,000 foot answer is on that. But do you think if the state of Illinois deemed it responsible and the right thing to do, ethically, morally, to save democracy, to save our country, to save us, do you think state of Illinois, if they did that, if they pulled Biden off the ballot, do they have a right to do that?
Well, I don't know. I'd have to review the statutes of the state of Illinois first, and that's a preface, right?
Okay.
But I would add that
how would you feel about it?
Well, I don't know.
Without knowing the law.
Yeah, without knowing the law, I would say, well, the question mark I would have is like, well, you asked me if I believed in states' rights because you do. Do you only believe in states' rights when it's convenient for you and it aligns with your belief? Or do you believe, no, I think Illinois should be able to do that? And also, like, if I had to flip that script or whatever, would you also believe that Colorado would have the right to remove, say, Donald Trump from the ballot per I think it's the 13th or the 14th Amendment? Do you believe in all the amendments? Or are you going to pick and choose, hey, I like number 2, and I like number 5, and I like number 10, but I'm going to skip 1, 4, and 13?
It's kind of like this. I think there's a loophole for every amendment and an exception, and I think there's a loophole and exception for every commandment. So I'll talk about the commandments. Yeah. If somebody believes that on the Sabbath they have to keep it holy, well, how can you keep it holy if you're going to go to work? You're going to go work on the Sabbath? Oh, really? Well, I have to feed my kids. Or they might say, this is the only day in the next 50 days in the middle of the raining season that I can cut my grass.
Yeah.
Is there an exception? Or, respect your mother and your father. Well, what if your mother and father are, like, doing terrible, terrible things to you, unspeakable things? Should you still respect them? Or you can, thou shalt not kill.
Yeah.
Self-defense. There are loopholes for everything. So, but I'm not trying to get caught in the minutia of the gory details of it. I'm just saying, like, can I give you my opinion about the Colorado thing and the Maine thing? So the states of Colorado, the state of Colorado and the state of Maine pulled Trump off the ballot, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So they're doing it because their constitution, their way of life says that they can do that.
Oh, what about the 13th Amendment that said no person that's deemed a traitor is allowed to serve in public office?
Well, how do you determine who is a traitor and who's not? A court of law?
Well, I think, the correct answer is, again, I don't know. But I would say that if they said, hey, the Congress held someone in contempt, or this individual is currently being prosecuted against in multiple states in both New York and Georgia, so it's not a red and blue thing per se right now. Because I say that, but I guess Georgia has kind of swung blue. But
no, I would say it absolutely is a blue and red thing. I would say it's definitely politics. I would think that if someone is deemed a traitor, you would have to go through all of the court evidence and rule, and then there needs to be a judgment. So if the courts come out and say that he's a traitor, okay, then I would say according to the amendments and according to the states' rights, then Colorado and Maine should probably be able to do that. But that hasn't happened. None of that has happened, right?
What has not happened?
There has not been a court ruling anywhere that has said that Donald Trump is a traitor. This is the ruling in court that he's a traitor, and so now we have legal grounds to pull him off the ballot. And if there is, I don't believe there is. So I'm always looking for that evidence. Like, where's the court ruling? He's got all of these. He's got all of these indictments against him. And just so you know, I'm not going to tell everybody who voted for who. Okay, but I made a huge mistake by not voting for Trump.
Okay.
But
you're saying
I have never voted for Trump.
Okay.
And I think that is a mistake. I think I made a mistake. Okay. I'm also kind of like, I use it as a badge, like when I'm talking to.
Wasn't me.
No, yeah, it's like, I'm so libertarian that I feel like I can't vote for a person like Trump. You and I have talked about that. Like, I wish I could say I did, but I have not. That doesn't mean I won't going forward, based on, I don't know, right? I'm so libertarian. I might write in again, but I probably won't make that mistake again.
Right.
But I'm just saying, like, Colorado and Maine have pulled him off the ballot, in my opinion, not due to any kind of hard evidence or, like, according to this court ruling, he's been found guilty. Dun dun dun. Stamping it. Everyone finds out. Oh my gosh, court finds Trump guilty. None of that's happened. or am I wrong?
I believe that Congress has identified that there has been, per the January 6th commission, that there is evidence to believe that Donald Trump executed some behavior that I think, like you said, like, there's some rules that are subject to people are going to lean one side or the other. Like you said, in killing versus self-defense, there's got to be an exception to that, right? There's objective and then there's subjective. Like there's something that's like open to interpretation. And I think that the January 6th Commission had enough evidence at that point that there are states that are not my state. And by the way, you shouldn't be arguing that they ought to not do that, because if you believe in states' rights, you should say, well, Colorado should be able to do this and Maine should be able to do this. I think the question mark is still like the states get to determine who gets to be on the ballots and what those rules are for that. And obviously, like, the current activity is that I believe that this will likely go up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court obviously does not want to pick winners and losers when it comes to elections, because then they get criticism for that no matter what. Like you said, Bush v. Gore earlier.
I guess what I'm saying is it's not that I think they should or shouldn't. I'm saying it seems to me that if one side is going to fight like that, this open to interpretation, read the tea leaves, is kind of what I hear you saying. You got to look at the tea leaves and kind of see which, look at the Rorschach and see what the soothsayer in your dream said to do, and then pull them off the ballot. That is what I hear. Now, you're not saying that, but that's what I hear.
The states get to determine that, though.
They
we don't get to figure that out, right?
What
The
I'm
states
saying
get
is,
to-
right, and I'm saying that all of the battleground states, the people who want to fight, who are trying to fight the power, who are terribly effete. Like, it's embarrassing. Okay, one of the reasons why I have a real hard time assigning a political party to myself, I have a very difficult time, is because of the ineffectiveness of the so-called side that I would normally lean to. I think they're so ineffectual and so terrible at their jobs that I don't really want to be associated with that. But
I think a majority of Americans would agree with that. That I think a lot of Democrats don't necessarily get excited about Joe Biden, and I think a lot of Republicans still don't get excited about Donald Trump or whatever. Obviously, there's going to be contingents that are still supportive of those folks. But as I identify myself as not necessarily a libertarian. I call myself a radical moderate.
what does that mean? I might steal it from you if it's really good. Thanks for the cocktail, by the way.
Oh, you bet. El Presidente, ironically, is the name of this cocktail.
Really? Yeah. What is a radical moderate?
It's a made up term from myself that I just believe that I see valid arguments on both sides of the political aisle. And I'm a firm, I believe in the Constitution, and I think that Constitution has things that I agree with, and there's things that I don't agree with, but at the end of the day, I have to back up, an example would be I have to defend the KKK's right to have political assembly per the First Amendment, and I have to say that, hey, these folks have the right to bear arms, and what does that necessarily mean? And I might say, well, you got to look at the different rules and history behind that statement of you have the right to assemble in a militia and to bear arms, but obviously there's folks in Michigan that believe that they had a militia, and that was against the law at that point, right? Yeah. It gets to be a lot of convoluted elements that are going on top of each other, but I believe that there's always going to be a we'll call it some sort of spectrum, a political spectrum, whatever, that I'm always towards the center, because I always find that in my, call it my liberal friends, they think I'm an evil conservative, and in my conservative friends, they think I'm a wacko liberal. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of in between, I guess.
Because you won't take a stand, David.
No, I always take a stand.
No, I'm joking.
I would say that I've been a registered Republican for most of my voting life. And I got frustrated because someone that's been in the political party for 10 minutes is telling me I was a rhino, and then taking on political stances that were alienating every other major Republican candidate for the last 20 years. Who's the rhino? It's is it me, or is the guy I voted for John McCain in 2016, and I voted for John McCain in 2012, Mitt Romney in 2016. Who is, am I really considered to be a rhino at this point? Maybe I didn't leave the Republican Party. Maybe the Republican Party left me.
Yeah. I think the term rhino is really interesting because you can be on the right and be moderate and be called a rhino by the Tea Party, by the extreme right. But then you get guys like me who I think we should own tanks. So I that's a half joke. That's a half joke.
Because my practice is when I talk about the Second Amendment is I'll say, okay, all right, do you believe I should be able to have nuclear weapons?
Are we doing this?
Yeah.
Okay. This is what we're doing.
Yeah. Do you believe that anybody out in the country should have nuclear weapon capabilities?
No.
Well, why not? Because isn't that arms as well? Because if you're fighting a war against any major country, we'll call it the United States as an example, or Great Britain, France, Russia, India, Pakistan, China,
because I don't believe that any American citizen should have the ability to travel to the moon and shoot a nuke at our planet to kill all of us.
So on the spectrum, and if that's considered the far right, as people have the personal freedom to own nuclear weapons, there's somewhere in between here and no one should own a gun at all on the far left. You're somewhere in between, right?
I am. No, this is a good This is a good discussion. Well, since we're there, I did not know we were going to talk about this, but that's the beauty. No, that's the beauty of it. No,
Yeah.
I want to.
Okay.
Like big
Yeah.
time. Let's just get into that.
Yeah, I think that it's a popular subject in this area, and I think that from my perspective, the biggest frustrating piece is from a political standpoint. Folks that own weapons are the best people to talk to about this subject and regulation of weapons. But too often, the voices that are talking about it don't own weapons, don't know what they're talking about. They'll talk about, what's the popular term? Assault weapons. And assault weapons doesn't mean anything.
Correct.
Right? So it's like, that doesn't mean it. So it's like, does that mean automatic weapons? Does that mean semi-automatic weapons? Are those regulated? Do we see, like, what does that look like? There's more questions to be asked about that.
Yes, and people who don't know the difference between a semi-automatic and a fully automatic, a lot of them are trying to make semi-autos banned illegal.
Yeah.
Just get rid of them
That's
because
like-
they don't know the difference.
Yeah, it's like 98% of the firearms are semi-automatics.
It's something like that.
Unless you are
It's
muzzle
something-
loading or you have, full metal, right? And the way I would best describe it is like semi-automatics is every time you pull the trigger, a bullet comes out, right? Fully automatic is you pull the trigger, multiple bullets come
rounds.
out, right?
Multiple
and then
rounds.
you've got single muzzle loaders, right? So a vast majority of handguns, of rifles, of hunting rifles, of any sort of weapon is going to be semi-automatic. And a vast majority, like nearly 100% of all firearm deaths are from semi-automatic weapons.
Yes.
And so I think like it's important to understand that as a starting point, because if you're not, you're speaking from a position of ignorance. So what does that mean? You know?
Yeah, you sound like a 2A guy. Either you are by accident or you're not. I don't know. I'm labeling you. No, I'm not labeling. No, I said you sound like one. Doesn't mean you are.
I'm a big 1A guy.
You can't have if you take away 2A, then the 1A is in deep trouble. 1A is in deep trouble anyway. But if you take away 2A, 1A is going to go down the tubes. I will say something about the firearm issue. There is something really sinister that started to happen around the turn of the century. Was Columbine the first really big one? I can't remember. You know, when you look at the Wikipedia for all of the mass shootings, and it'll take you days to get through it. It's shocking. It's a huge problem, and I don't know. Right around, I don't know when Columbine was. I want to say 98. I'm literally. I mean, we need to have like somebody fact check us on some of these things, but.
We can do that in post, right?
We can do that in post. like we can fix everything in post. No, but this is something that's kind of interesting. If I'm talking to somebody that is really against, so when they're calling something an assault weapon, weapon, okay.
It's really, really hard.
What they mean is, I'm almost positive that they think that if it's black, if it's painted black, it's a problem. I think they think that. I think they think the color of the weapon means something. Also, if it's got like ridges on the muzzle, I think they think that's a problem. And if it's got like a stock that like a something you hold against your a bump stock, or not even a bump stock, just like like a folding stock, or if it's got a scope on it, it could be bad. Or if you pull the trigger like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a round comes out every time, I think they think that's a problem.
Okay.
But the biggest issue right now in Illinois is, are you aware of the current law? Did you know that they are, it's legal, and I'm going to get myself into a ton of trouble for this. No, I really am.
Yeah.
I really am. Maybe I shouldn't say it, but what the heck? People who think that you should have like a 7-round magazine capability, maximum, like 7-round maximum or a 10-round maximum, they haven't said anything about how many magazines you can have on your person. Well,
so you think should there be a calculus of, hey?
No, what I'm saying is,
okay.
I think I'm correct in this. I think you can take, today in Illinois, I think you can have a bunch of 10 round or 7 round. I don't know what's illegal because I lost all of my firearms in a boating accident. I think they don't understand what Velcro is. They don't know what it is. They think like, okay, we banned 7 round magazines or 8 or 10, whatever the ban is. Well, as you know, have you ever gone to a shooting range?
Yes.
You know that like you can peel off as many rounds as you want. You can drop the clip and then just pull another magazine and stick it right in there, rack it, and keep going. And if one of your friends was sitting right next to you and said, I want to see how many rounds you can get off in 2 minutes, you can get, I don't know, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 rounds. You can get
in 2
off.
minutes?
Well, I'm
Man,
saying
it's
there
like
are.
you should be able to do at least 200.
You should be able to if you're trying to hit that paper target at the shooting range. But the people who are against these things and making all of these rules, they're not firearms people. They don't understand how it works. And so they're not smart enough to say, oh, by the way, not only are those magazines illegal and banned now and you're limited, also you can't have Velcro. Also, you can't have another magazine in your back pocket. They don't know what they're talking about. And it's very destructive because I'll make a comment that I want to hear your opinion on. Do you think that it is possible for a government to invade another government? Do you think a country can invade another country?
There's history of that, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So like, do you think that the citizens of that country should be able to protect themselves? If Russia comes into Ukraine with semi-autos, should Ukrainians have semi-autos to fight them?
I mean, we've seen that over the last several years.
Well,
right?
I'll tell you what. I've got family members that fly Ukrainian flags in their profile pics and on their car and on their houses and on the windows. They fly these Ukrainian flags. Those same people want me to not have the weapons that they're giving to the Ukrainians. So let me ask you this. If I'm looking for an enemy and I don't see one in Putin, I don't feel like he's going to hurt me. I don't feel like Ukrainians are going to hurt me. I don't feel that way.
Really?
I don't feel like they're going to come into my house and invade. I don't think they're going to invade my country.
Yeah, you've got
I
the
just don't think-
Pacific Ocean in between you, right?
Yeah, or the Atlantic, whichever way, or they can come in through the North Sea if they want to. But what I'm saying is, if somebody's telling me that I need to get rid of mine, but then they want to take mine and give them to Ukraine, these are like friends of mine, family members, and I'm looking for my enemy. Do I really have to look very far?
Yes, because I don't think that they're actively going to try to harm you.
Who? Ukraine and
Your friends,
Putin?
right? Maybe their
No,
decision
it's very
can
passive.
impact you.
It's very their passive aggressiveness towards me is like alarming.
But I would say that we are in a position that where there's not a lot of risk for the United States to be invaded. Hard stop, right? I believe, and I'm going to quote a podcaster named Dan Carlin. He said the biggest threat.
Dan Carlin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The biggest threat to the United States is not a bigger dog coming into the pack. The biggest threat to the United States is a flea, because a flea isn't going to overpower you as a dog. But what you're going to do is you're going to attack the flea and you're going to swipe it and you're going to end up scratching yourself. You're going to get infection, then you die, right? I think that we have to actively look for our fleas in our society and what that looks like of why are we trying to swipe at ourselves and what's making us a weaker country, because we're focused on the flea and not necessarily the overarching problem that could be existing, right?
Well said.
So
Well, my point was, my friends and family who are trying to disarm me are those fleas.
They're not the fleas.
What do you think the biggest problem in the United States is?
Oh, hard stop, poverty. Poverty is the hardest. Yeah, that is the thing that is keeping us from growing as a country. I think that poverty eventually, if ignored for long enough, we saw what happened in late 18th century France, and we saw what happened in the United States in the late 18th century, right? History repeats itself, and if you ignore poverty for the long term, eventually poverty is going to eat you, right? That's what's going to happen. And I think that I am a Christian, and I can't speak for anyone else, but I believe Christians are called to serve the poor and to help the poor and support the poor. And I think that poverty is probably the biggest overarching problem in the United States, that we don't have enough structures within capitalism to kind of have and solve and necessarily have it be a perfect solution. And that's not to say the elements that are in place aren't good and they're not effective. It's like, I think if you talk to anyone, I'll super localize this. Like, I think if you talk to the folks at the Horizon Soup Kitchens, I think that they could say, hey, there's more that we wish we could do if we had the capacity and the resources and whatnot, or the Salvation Army, or the churches, or the communities around town. You find that in our community, there are opportunities to help solve the problem that's right here. And I think too many people are looking at the flea of like, Russia's going to invade us. And it's like the likelihood of that, or the likelihood of an atomic bomb going off in the United States is so low that the problem that you should be focused on is helping the person down the street. As a Christian, I believe that. And I think as an American, that's the biggest opportunity that we can solve and make our society and country better.
So I know what neighbors can do, the constituency can do to help their neighbor. Because, I live in a neighborhood. I live in Quincy. When you were talking about a soup kitchen, I know what I can do as a person locally to help those people. But do you think people are better served doing that from a volunteer standpoint, or better off giving their money to, let's say, like a central planner to do that work?
What a capitalist comment that you have.
Yeah.
I think I have to say, let's focus on the problem and then figure out what the solution is, and not focus on what our solutions look like to try to solve the problem, right? And I think that I don't know. I think if someone were to say, what's the best thing I could do to try to help poverty in my community, I'd say, well, give dollars to a local soup kitchen or a community pantry, or see what you can do to help support that. Maybe they need volunteers. I don't know what that looks like, but I would say I don't know. But right now the structure that we have is that there's still hunger and poverty here in Quincy and Adams County, that's a problem. And I think that we need to figure out what the solutions will be long term. You also look at I'll pick on the city council and the recent, how should we regulate whether people should have housing conditions that are below both the state and local standard, but there's no system in place to protect people that are in that situation. And it's like, well, you and I are not in poverty. We don't have necessarily a financial incentive to help those folks. So we just want our taxes to stay low. And yeah, I want my taxes to stay low too. But I would say that how can we help folks that are living in a scenario where, hey, there's rain coming down, water coming down on their sinks, and their electricals are going out frequently, and it's been negative 10 degrees out recently, and it's cold. What kind of solutions can we have in place for that? And I feel like we missed out as a community of trying to put together something that's not really going to cost all that much. And people might criticize me for that, say, hey, it's a bureaucracy that's going to cost $50. And it's like, well, we can structure it in a way to make sure that folks have the proper incentives and structures in place to make sure that people are still protected and not living in that sub-poverty standard. But we don't have that today, and I felt like that was a miss as a community.
It seems like a miss. I wonder if, so this is what government likes to do, even local government. They go, boy, first of all, about this cocktail, that's one of the best cocktails I've ever had. I'm going to ask Bob if he liked it at the end of this pod. He gave a thumbs up. There it is. Do you ever notice, let's talk about the local community about how to fix these substandard housing conditions. If we were to ask what percentage of rentals in Quincy are below the standard, the local, state, whatever the rules and regulations are on that. What percentage are below the standards? Do you want to hazard a guess on what you think it is?
I would say it's probably relatively low.
Well, here's the problem. And this is what government does. This is why I fight against government.
Oh, and by the way, shame on me. I know Muddy River recently had an article, and I think the Quincy Herald Whig recently had an article that talked about those percentages. And I applaud both organizations for covering it, because I think that's important. I just said that the biggest problem in the United States is poverty. But I would say, like, I think that we need to continue to shine lights on that. So I applaud any media organization that devotes resources to cover folks that are.
Yeah, Muddy River did cover it. Muddy River covers it every time that I can see that this is in the local news. It is my experience that Muddy River covers that.
Yeah.
Big time.
Love that.
I don't know the percentage of the rental units that are below the standards, but I don't think it's the majority.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. But I would also argue that, like,
But I'm going somewhere with that, though.
Yeah, but if you have any rental, like, I'm sure that everything is fine. So it's like you're doing everything to do the standard, and you're not, like, you should not be penalized for that, right?
But they want to.
Yeah, and
They
we need
want
to create a solution.
They want to penalize the people who are doing the right things. They want to penalize them with time, money. They're afraid. They're afraid of going to the slumlords in Quincy and call them out and say, you need to put a roof on this thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
That doesn't leak.
You need to do this and this and this. This is horrible what you're doing. What you're doing is illegal. Okay. They're afraid of doing that. So what they want to do is they want to drag everybody into one place and yell at everybody and say, everybody needs to do this new system. So all the people that are doing the right thing, this is how everything works. This is how everything is. It's like with firearms, same thing. You've got psychopaths, you've got people with mental disorders doing unspeakable things with firearms. I'm going off on a rule. You can jump right back in here. I'm just saying, like, in every single situation, people are obeying the law, and there's people who are not obeying the law, and then everybody gets penalized. It's the bad apple spoils the bunch. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I agree, and we see that in several different rules that get created. Like, it's always funny when you watch a movie before 2001, when September 11th happened, like what people did in getting into the airports and stuff like that. And that's like, I just imagine a kid being born in the last 20 years and saying, what was that like? But what happens is something bad happens, and then we create rules that impact everybody, right? That is the standard. And for like firearms, for example, I think one thing that often gets ignored in the conversation is I think that a majority or a huge piece of firearm deaths are suicides.
Yeah, like a lot.
So what is your proposal solution to fix that? And I think that some people would say, well, I deserve the right to bear arms, therefore it doesn't matter. Like they can just die or whatever.
There are people whose solution to that is to take away firearms.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think that there are probably scenarios where that might be a good idea.
Yeah, but you got to figure out.
But the
nuance. But the nuance of that, though,
that goes to the small percent. Like, one question I would have for you would be is, like, you said we have to call out the slumlords, but no one's brave enough to call them out. Well, why is that?
Oh, because people are just afraid. People are afraid left and right. They're always afraid to say what they want. People, generally speaking. Okay, I was having a conversation with my dad about this over Christmas.
Great.
We were talking about what really needs to happen, in this country. And have you ever heard the joke? It's like, well, like the protesters are out there. They're out there. Well, because, so the joke is they don't have jobs. They don't have any wealth.
Yeah.
They don't have anything. And so they're out there protesting. Well, the people with jobs can't get off of work to go protest. I don't know if that's true. I just heard that that's kind of what happens.
That is a very old stereotype.
It's an old stereotype, which
that might have there might be some merit to it, but I would say if anyone is willing to give up their day and their time, because the only asset or the only resource that all of us have is really just time, right? How we spend that is the study of economics. Is how do you manage resources, limited resources, and what does that look like? So it's like if you're going to respect someone of what their time looks like, if they want to spend that protesting something, I think that there's merit to that. And even though that's not how you'd spend your time, you're spending it might be working, or I might spend at work or whatever. But that doesn't diminish their intent and how they're spending their resource, right?
Right. Oh yeah. I don't know how to fix. I don't know how to fix all of society's ills.
No.
I just know that it's very popular for them to look at people like me, people like you, and you may not get real angry when they look at you and say, "Hey, this is kind of your fault," which they do. You know that, right?
Hey,
you know they think it's your fault. A lot of them,
of course,
think it's your fault. You have privilege. And I think
I agree.
I think you and I talked about this, where it's like I don't believe that the word privilege is being used very well. I think you need to substitute that word with fortune, because if we're talking about, for example, if the reason why I'm in the situation where I'm in is because my parents stuck together, they stayed married, they sent me to school, they made me do my homework. When I got out of line, they drove me back into line with thunder. Okay. I mean, they did. And then if everybody does that, I mean, if you can erase, you want to talk about poverty? One of the issues to poverty, of solving poverty, is don't have a child.
Yeah, Rick Santorum got in trouble for saying that, right?
I mean,
he's like, I can solve 90% of poverty. Just don't have kids or graduate from high school, get married and have kids and do it in that order, and you'll solve poverty or whatever. And he got flack for that, but there, and I would say, yeah, he probably deserved getting flack for that.
Really?
But there's an element of truth to it too.
An element of truth, okay.
And that's what's hard to it, where it's yeah, I think that that was my way of solving not going into poverty.
Well, I'm going to tell my kids.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell my kids, you want to avoid poverty?
Do it in that order.
Do it in that order. Do not have a child out of wedlock.
Yeah.
I will tell you, if I had a child out of wedlock when I was 17 years old, I don't think I'd be talking to you. Maybe, but I just don't think so.
Well, and I guess my challenge for you is also I think to myself, if someone under the age of 18 is born into that situation, how are we going to provide resources to them that it doesn't reoccur?
What does that mean, provide resources?
Well, that could be time, that could be talent, that could be treasure, of trying to avoid that situation from happening again. Because you said you had a parent that brought the thunder.
Parents.
Right? Parents that
Both
brought the
parents
thunder.
brought the thunder.
Good. And probably instilled some discipline and good habits for you to be successul, which is great.
Yeah.
But that individual might
fortune.
The fortune. Sorry.
Fortune.
How is that individual? There's no chance of fortune, I guess, from your perspective, right?
Well, no, I wouldn't say no.
Okay.
I wouldn't say no chance of fortune.
Okay. What is their opportunity for success?
For whom? For somebody who doesn't have all that?
An individual that was born, they didn't have any behavioral, they didn't make the choices that they were positioned in. How do we create a situation where that person can escape poverty and have success in society?
That person has to essentially, and I'm saying this not because I think this is going to happen, but because I think once the genie's out of the bottle, if you have a 17, 18-year-old, should I make this person male or female? Let's just go through this.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Okay. Let's say it's male. Okay. Is he going to stay with that girl that he got pregnant?
I don't know.
We need to know that.
But I would say a lot of the problem though is, remember, they might be 6 years old and going to school, and they're going home over the weekend and no one's cooking a meal for them, right?
Okay.
And we
There you go.
And we have systems somewhat in place like that I know a lot of local community orgs that go into schools and they have, say, like blessings in a backpack or something along the lines that enable those folks to have like a meal over the weekend. But I think my question for you would be is like, what about having schools, like, because we have like the school lunch program. And I guess my question would be is, do you support that? Do you not support that?
Do I support school lunch?
Yes.
Programs?
Yes.
Yeah, so 60% of all the kids in the public school don't have money for lunch.
Yeah.
60%.
And imagine being hungry and trying to study in class.
Well, it's like,
That's tough, man.
you know what? So it goes back to this. Do you know what a child has to have in the morning before they go to school? Like food-wise?
I imagine.
Do you know what they have to have?
Breakfast.
It's more than that.
Protein.
It's more than that. Protein. So, like, if you give a kid sugary cereal, so I'm going to brag on my kids. I either got lucky or this is some random thing that, like, just kind of like, I'm just, everywhere I go, it's really easy for me, which is, by the way, not the case. Not the case. I want to have a pod where
Your
I do all
wife
the
does
talking.
a lot to make it easy.
My wife is amazing. My wife is amazing. But I will tell you, you know what I had to do to get her? I had to be a certain kind of a person. I had to be a certain kind of a man. And when you look at like an incredible woman, like if you want to know what a man thinks of himself, like really thinks of himself, look at his wife. Then you'll get like a glimpse of kind of like what he thinks about himself. But like, so
I am far less deserving of my amazing wife.
I feel that way too. I mean, I'm not, I mean, she's the queen. I love her all the way, and she's the best thing that's ever happened. So that, I mean, she knows that I think that. She's gonna listen to this. She's like, oh. But by the way, if she hears this, she's not going to care about any of these things that I'm saying, because she's like, oh, Frankie's on a pod. He's got to tell David this. Like, I've heard it before. He had too many drinks last weekend. He said the same thing to somebody.
Just got loosened up.
Yeah, you made me El Presidente, so I'm gonna start, getting undressed here in a second. But no, when you don't parent a kid correctly, the genie's out of the bottle. The kid's in serious trouble. And parents who don't parent their kids correctly, they usher in a whole new era and a whole new generation of whatever that generation is going to be known for. And you don't always know right away. The new generation that's out right now is Gen Alpha, okay? And you're about to have a child.
I am.
In 2 months?
Correct.
2 months, right? Yeah. And I don't know if that generation is going to be Gen Alpha or Gen Beta. I don't know. But before Gen Alpha was Gen Z. Those are the Zoomers.
The Zoomers?
So my kids were born in 15, 16, and 19. Okay? That's Gen Alpha.
Yeah.
Before that generation is Gen Z. It went X, Y, Z, Alpha. Anyway. I'm not saying you're tracking
I would
this.
describe them as X, I understand. Y is
millennial.
I would say I identify as a millennial.
That's why.
Yeah, but
Y are millennials, and
but
Z
the
is
problem
Zoomers.
is if you just start doing this, like you're defining everything based on the X.
No.
Because it's just sequential, right?
No.
I would argue that the baby boom generation was the biggest generation in the history of the United States, and then millennials happened, right?
Yeah.
And I think millennials, being the new superpower generation, as baby boomers continue to retire, millennials will they've started to gain more influence, economic influence, but we've not seen that on a political widespread. And I think I'm kind of curious of how the United States is going to how it's going to be impacted based on millennials and the major factors of millennials is I would say, hey, you have Columbine was a big millennial event, and Y2K was a big millennial event.
Yeah.
Probably the most defining thing was September 11th.
Yeah.
You have, and then the introduction of social media, whether that's MySpace, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, these things are the defining things of the millennial generation. What does that look like politically over the next 25 years as millennials, in theory, if they're in their 30s to 40s, late 40s right now, they're going to start to get more political influence. and what does that look like? I don't know yet. And then, like, you know, you mentioned Zoomers or Gen Z, or I don't have the, I don't know what necessarily the name is that's going to define them, but I think that obviously, like, the COVID-19 pandemic is going to be one of the major things.
Yes.
And what that impact is, I don't know, because, like, you can frequently look at a Gen X or a baby boomer or a millennial, and these events, you can see how it kind of not necessarily impacts the individual, but impacts the overall, like, society. Like, and I always, like, laugh to myself, like, one thing that, like, when you go to the grocery store and you see something that's, like, fat-free or something, that's got, like, baby boomer written all over it, right? Because, like, millennials look at fat-free and it's like, well, it's not going to taste good. You should just eat less of it if it's, like, you know, fat-free sour cream, for example, or whatever, like, whatever that looks like, right? Yeah. And I think to myself, like, there's generational things of what define them, and it's always interesting to see what that looks like overall. Like, you know, and, like, I know in this area, not necessarily very popular is, like, the plant-based diet and what that looks like, right? But the reality is plant-based diets have grown astronomically over the last, literally, like, the last 5 years, right?
Yes.
And I think to myself, like, people are doing that for multiple reasons. Some folks are doing it for the environment. Other folks are doing it for health reasons. Other folks are doing it for whatever, right? Whatever the reason is, that's a reality that we're experiencing right now that I'm curious of what that impact is going to be from a political and socioeconomic standpoint. So
where this podcast is done for today, I want to offer you something. The great Kate Daniels is coming next week, and the week after that is Ryan Hincamper. And hold on, why are you laughing?
I just feel like what a great yin and yang.
Yes, but you are the radical moderate. So would you care? So I had you as the radical moderate, the rational centered, the voice of reason, the person who's going to keep the train on the rails going forward as you are bringing in maybe the end of Gen Alpha or the beginning of Gen Beta. I don't know. Your child.
I don't know.
I hope your child is a masculine child.
By the way, there's
just
a lot
joking.
of Zoomers that don't know what that reference is.
Luca Brasi, Godfather. So I will have Kate Daniels on next week, and I'll have Ryan Hincamper, and I'm glad you understand the nuance of how cool that is to have those two very cool people coming on. Maybe you can come the next week and tie up any loose ends we have between Kate and Ryan.
Okay.
Because I like the exchange, and we've kind of blown past the point where we usually need to go. I thank you so much for coming on the pod.
Thanks for having me.
I hope the hour blew by fast for you.
It did.
And we might have to hook up another Presidente before I go to this this wrestling practice.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. Totally joking. David.
Appreciate it, Frankie.
Thank you. See ya.
You bet.
A&B Properties is Quincy's largest apartment rental company with hundreds of units available. They offer short-term and long-term rentals with 1 up to 4 bedroom apartments. A&B Properties meets the needs of its tenants with care, compassion, and a quality of service that exceeds expectations. A&B Properties also has a convenient tenant app for you to do your payments or make repair requests. Give them a call today. A&B Properties, 217-919-8080, Quincy.